right, hi everyone. So today's day 8 out of 30. Um, and as a side note, I actually uploaded something, namely the exact same video, but I realized there was no sound on it. So we're doing it again. This time I'll try to keep myself short. So I'm currently reading Bubbles and and the End of Stagnation. And the whole idea is all about, even though we're kind of progressing, we're doing innovation. At least that's what we're being told the whole time. Our living standards, our scientific progress, how we perceive the world, it didn't actually change. It stagnated. It didn't get better. And the whole book talks about different areas of life where we can see this. And I found the most important and interesting one was where they talk about research. And so that's why we're looking into chapter 2 of this book. Again, it's about research. And why did I choose it? Because I'm developing a software for researchers where they can explore bold ideas. And I found my idea to be kind of resonating with this book. And I'll try to explain why. So let's dive in. By the way, this book and the book cover, you can find it on Stripe Press. It's nice. I like it. I actually have it here. It looks really nice. Yep. So far, one of the best books I've read. But we're getting into it now. So the main question the book kind of tries to answer is science becoming a cult? Because what they talk about is that science is becoming an institution where this certain institution only favors one way of thinking, namely the way where you can produce papers, where you can produce a lot of data, where your papers are being published in Nature and Scientific American and all that stuff, and where your prestige is the most important thing you can have as a researcher. So the notion of progress, of innovation, of breakthrough science is actually not that important. And so that's what they talk about. Now, in the last 50 years, or like 50 years ago, let's frame it that way, you saw the following technologies being developed. You had telecommunications. You were able to call people, right? That's a man. Like, if you were born at the beginning of the 20th century, you would have not recognized this technology looking at the beginning of the 21st century. So that's a huge deal. Next, you had DARPA. Now, I don't really remember the whole abbreviation, but what I know is that this was the Defense Ministry of the US. It's still called that way. And what they developed, what we all still use, is the foundation technology of GPS. Huge thing. Again, you were able to navigate in areas where you were never, like, yeah, you never, you know the idea, where you never really went around and stuff. And the next big thing, which also kind of shaped Silicon Valley, is the production of microchips. These not only made Silicon Valley kind of the icon that we know, but also enabled the hardware tech that followed, namely computers, iPads, phones. They all rely on microchips. And I think the company that was the first in Silicon Valley to produce these microchips was Microsystems Incorporated, I think. I'm not quite sure. I didn't look that up, so take that with a grain of salt because I don't know. What else did you have? You had Apollo. You had the first human beings on a different planet. It's 2025, and what we got is a social media epidemic, which we frame as kind of like innovation because we can communicate with more people, which it is not, because I'm not going into this in detail, but if you're seeing the studies, it's causing brain rot, literal brain rot. It's causing you to have a stagnation in certain brain areas, specifically for communication and the perception of your, yeah, of your people and specifically how they perceive emotion. So you're not able to read the room. So a lot of things are happening, and we still frame that as innovation. So we don't have any more moon landings. We don't have any breakthrough technologies in communication. We don't have breakthrough technologies in the sciences, for instance. We somehow have nothing. And all right, I forgot to mention plastics, which enabled mass consumerism. Also important for the tech that was developed to be spread in the normal population. So science 50 years ago was a revolution. It changed lives. Now science is kind of like we don't understand science now. We don't know where it's headed. We feel like there are topics that are big, for instance, personalized medicine. We hear a lot about cancer therapies, but we are not able to cure, for instance, cancer patients. We're not able to cure dementia patients. We didn't solve the energy crisis in terms of how can we produce renewable energies in and store them actually so that we can avoid using fossil fuels. We didn't solve that. We didn't solve any important issues. We just made seem science big. And that's also kind of like one of the theories that the authors have. So for them, science has become a one-directional cold thinking in which certain aspects, as we will go through, are more important than science itself. So where does this all start? It starts at education. So we treat education as a portfolio where we try to maximize our learnings for future earnings. We try to maximize it in terms of trying not to take a lot of risks. That is choosing a career that is very stable without the individual having a vision in it. Take, for instance, medicine. You might want to do medicine because you want to do get research later on, but if you want to do medicine mainly because of the money, then you really don't have a vision behind it. We made education specialized. So if you do your undergrad, right, I actually drew it down here. You do your bachelor's, you do your master's, you do your PhD, and then you have specialized yourself in a certain field. Let's say you want to do only stem cells. You are not going to look out in any fields. So specifically, you have actually left science because you're looking at one tiny point, oops, in a huge field, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's my science. Doesn't work that way because even if you look at one tiny point in science, it has at least 10 corresponding science points where you need to look out for. And this is what specialization has done. It has kicked you out of the system. And the thing is, specialization also guarantees kind of like you having certain success in publishing papers. Because if you ever were supposed to write a paper for college, for high school, you know that teachers always tell you, oh, focus on one specific thing, which is great for starters, but you only learn to focus on one topic, one at a time, and not being able to see connections where, multiple science aspects would have made sense. I hope this makes sense until now. Yep. A recommendation for taking risks in education, by the way, for the finance world. It's Black Swan by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. Great book, talks how about we cannot predict future and all that stuff. You should read it if you have the time. So this is one issue. We made education specialized. We treat it like a hedge fund portfolio. Second thing, again, it's kind of like the second or like the next step of being specialized. It's the hyper specialization of science. It's when researchers take one path and are avoidant of taking another path. Because if you are the expert in one, why would you risk being a failure in another research aspect where you have people or seniors who have 10 years experience in that field? You are losing the ability to be inflexible in science, mainly because you said from the very beginning, I'm only going to do this one topic. And that's where science breaks, because science has different fields that need to be combined. Yep. Again, it's the thing with you have higher chances if you focus on one topic. less chances if you're focused on multiple topics. That makes sense, actually. Now we talk about how science has been turned into cooperation, kind of. So the next big thing is that we introduced key performance indicators in science that work well for corporations, because most corporations, they don't produce breakthrough science which involves being random. They just have internal goals, you should achieve them, and everybody's happy. In science, it doesn't work that way, because if you think about certain breakthrough science, take penicillin, for instance. Alexander Fleming wasn't aware he was even producing this. He left his petri dishes where he was running experiments, and he just left them and didn't clean them. And then he realized, oh, the fungi that I have in these dishes, they actually kill off bacteria. And that's how we got to our first antibiotics. It was random. No one knew how that would work. And because we eliminated randomness, we eliminated creativity, because if you cannot be random, you have to plan. And when you plan, you don't really have the most creative ideas, so you skip them. And you also eliminate uncertainty, which we'll come into later as to why you want to eliminate that, mainly because of grants. So you did all that, and you introduced KPIs, and you made science a business. And there is one quote, I'm not quite sure who said it, but if you Google it up, we'll find someone. It says, if you don't know what you're doing in science, you're doing it right. And that should be the mindset as a scientist. You should be going in having an assumption, but you don't need to be quite sure whether that works. You are here to learn on the discovery way. And we have made science all about data verification, not about discovering on the way. Yep, again, because you're trying to produce more papers that produce prestige, and those do not produce the long-term effects that we want to see for humanity. You're not going to cure cancer if you're chasing prestige, right? So we go to the fourth reason. Fourth reason is the demographic shift, which is just that we have too many old people in very important position in science. And also, the older civilization gets, or society, the more money you need to spend on social systems. So if you look at the West, you have low fertility rates, high costs for social systems, and you are running out of money, right? So for research, you can only spend a very tiny percentage. And as we have seen, because science is now directed more as a business with KPIs and producing papers, you are not getting the results out of putting more money into a broken system. And besides, you don't have a lot to spend. And another issue is a lot of old people, they're very hesitant towards new ideas. So assume you come up with a great idea, you know it has some value. People in senior positions, they're not going to agree with you because they think they have 10 years experience. Why would we listen to you? So there is a power imbalance, and you're going to lose that fight 10 out of 10 times. Yeah. So that would be the issue. And I'm thinking, yeah, so that's the fifth issue actually, because I did the video beforehand, so I'm thinking about what I said earlier. So if you assume that more grants equals more breakthrough science because you get more money, as we've seen, that's not true. You have old people, you have a broken system. But what you also have is, as we've said, a specialized education from the very beginning without risk taking. You have this kind of thing where you sign a lot of papers. Turns out 40% of a researcher's time goes back to filling out paperwork for grants. And imagine the time that could have been spent on actual important projects while you're losing them because you're signing out papers. Next thing is that, again, science, you need papers. That's the most important thing. And what's also an issue, that's data manipulation. Because what you can do, which is allowed, by the way, is so-called p-hacking. So you establish a statistical significance by saying, oh, I found that for protein X, there is an enzyme Y that does a certain work with a probability of less than 5%. That's kind of random. So if you can say that P in all your experiments and all your data is less than 5%, you can say there's a correlation. And that's what researchers are always looking for this value, which they can manipulate by using different data. And that's also kind of the issue where you can't reproduce a lot of papers, by the way. Specifically in these top journals, if you see a lot of data, chances are high that you cannot reproduce them because of the p-hacking, because they used different data, manipulated the data to get the p-value that they needed. So these are all the issues that we face in science. Bigger question is, how can we solve that? Because the book is all about how can we make our future great again? How can we build a vision that makes future great? Now, they took an interesting turn. So they were looking at the history of science and they were like, well, science is so complex and so diverse. We should not be having one pathway for each science or like for every science, because that doesn't work. You cannot use the same approach for psychology, biology, chemistry, history. In all these sciences, you need certain rules and certain frameworks that work for one specific science and even like subtopics. So encouraging maybe a dialogue where, you have professors, where you might have undergrad students, where you have people that want to do research but don't have the academic qualifications. Let them figure out a way on how to produce new research that takes in the strength of certain mindsets and certain existing institutions, right? Because saying I want a paper each time that I do research, that's misleading. But what you could say is we care about the discovery and we're going to give you a 20-year time horizon. That's amazing. A lot of people would jump on that as long as you could tell them we will wait 20 years. But we don't do that. What else could you do? You could say encourage risk, specifically in early education. Make individuals, make students try to figure out what they want to do. They shouldn't follow paradigms set up by schools, set up by parents, set up by friends. They should go out, see what frameworks there are, and maybe choose one or choose none, right? Or maybe develop a different one where they found certain aspects that they liked out of two and implemented them for life. And then doing risks is not a symptom of being misaligned in any way. It's more about you saw a certain purpose, what you want to do with your life, and you are going to chase it. There's nothing wrong with that. And society should not be like, oh, that's a failure if you want to be a founder. No, go ahead, fail. And if you do, understand why you fail and go on, explore more. We don't have that. And I think, me trying to do this with Theioptera, where I'm saying, I want to encourage researchers with essentially no money, no resources to do bold ideas at an incredible fast speed and a fraction of costs they would normally pay. Because again, they need grants. And I'm building Theioptera and I can tell you, they're not paying 50K or applying for a 50K grant. That's like a Spotify subscription, but for research. And the thing is, after reading the chapter, I was thinking, I know this is a contradiction when I say I want to encourage researchers to produce their own papers. When I was saying that papers, they're kind of like a path to prestige and they don't bring any knowledge that is really important for mankind. That's not necessarily true if the system stays the way it is. Because as long as the system is not fixed, you need papers to have an entry into the STEM and academia world. And so that's why I kind of think that using a workflow where you still have complete control over what data you're using, what papers you're using, what methods you're using, and what wet lab experiments you want to be doing is a reasonable way to start making a change, maybe. But again, I'm trying to figure out a new way, and I'm using my own MVP at this point. And the thing is, it does help me see gaps. It does help me identify issues before they arise. It helps me see that I have certain ideas and there is data that I can use. But the thing is, I don't have a feature where you can actually prove that this is reproducible data. So that's something I'll need to add. But you should have a chance to be bold, see where this idea might take you. And if I can build at least the basic version for that for people to use, that would be enough for me. Because then I could be, well, I'm not going to be satisfied in a way where I could be like, oh, that was a success. Not really. But it's always nice to see that certain ideas have an impact, no matter how small they are. So I think that's why I like chapter 2 of this book so much, because it does resonate with me. It does resonate with how I feel like science should be. And in the end, you should be creative. Go out, try new things, do stuff that maybe is not related to science. Maybe it will help you in a certain way. Yeah, and I think that's it. That would be it. Thank you for your attention for this TED Talk. I don't know how long it took me to record this. I hope it didn't take too long. Yeah. And apart from that, see you tomorrow for day 10.